and in this video we're going to be talking about what are cards. Cards is a term that is used in debate, whether it's in RFDs or speeches, that is going to be used a lot. So it's a very important concept to know what exactly is a card, where it came from, why we call them cards, and how to use them inside of a debate. We're first going to start by asking ourselves, why are they called cards? Well, the history of cards involves the original form of evidentiary support that debaters used to use. Long ago, before the invention of Xerox machines, debaters would take literal note cards, the ones you would use to take notes when you're giving a public speech or wanted to have a family recipe on it for a meal that you're going to make or a dessert you're going to make. And they would take those note cards and go to the library, and they would write out the citation from where their evidence came from and write out quotations from those sources onto these note cards. And they would take these note cards into debate and use them. That's why they're called cards. Now, throughout time, people became more efficient at presenting and capturing all of their evidence that they were using inside of debate rounds. Xerox machines were the next big step in card production and card storage, because with copy machines, that changed everything. Now, debaters went from using note cards to organize things to instead putting multiple quotes with sources on pieces of paper, so you could have multiple cards per page. And then you would simply just photocopy those pieces of paper and give them to every member of the squad, instead of everyone having to use those note cards. Then, eventually, we started using word templates, and inside of word templates or word processing templates, debaters would have a template that would have the tag, the source citation, and then the text of the card, and then they would print those off onto pieces of paper and then copy those pieces of paper to distribute to everyone on the squad. This is especially true as we transitioned to using more online sources, because it didn't require typing out word for word things that were coming out of books. It didn't require OCRing books or anything like that. So as the shift moved to more electronic sources and less on books and magazines and newspapers, it transitioned more to using these word processing templates to create files. But even then, in that infant stage of templates, you had people who were printing off these files in order to be photocopied. Nowadays, we still use templates, but we debate paperlessly. So that means that instead of printing them off, all of our cards and evidence out, so that people would lug around big old tubs that were oftentimes 40 to 50 pounds full of evidence, now we store all of our evidence inside of these Word documents or word processing documents that are created that use the template in order to debate. You can learn more about paperless debate in our sections down below, but for now, just know that that's kind of the reason why we call them cards. It's just been a term that's stuck throughout time. So the first part of a card is a tag. And a tag is a summary of the evidence being presented. Will often tell the judge what they should do with this information or how to interpret that information that is being presented. They will have different font features generally in most of the templates than the rest of the card. They're often going to be bold, possibly a larger font. For example, if you look at the yellow highlighted part on the screen right there, that is the card. It is making a claim about the world, that recidivism prevents education spending. So if you notice, the tag is there, highlighted in yellow, and then there's some space before the citation, and then there's some more space before the actual text of the card. The next part of a card, as you probably can guess, is a citation. There's a few reasons why we cite our evidence. First, it ensures proper credit is given to the work that we're using inside of debate. Second, it ensures teams can interrogate the ethos of the evidence and make sure that it is credible. Third reason is that it ensures debaters can go find cited pieces of evidence and research those articles that other teams are using themselves. There's a lot of data sharing that occurs inside of debate rounds, and so those citations are critical for opponents to be able to research the concepts that you are talking about by reading the original literature themselves. The format for online sources is going to be author, comma, qualifications, period, article title, comma, periodical title, period, date of publication, and then the web address. For books, it's very similar. You'll have author, qualifications, book title, date of publication, and then the page number. Again, we'll use that same piece of evidence we looked at earlier, but you notice that this time the citation is highlighted. And if you also look at that, you can tell that there actually isn't any qualifications for those authors. That's sometimes typical, especially when they're staff writers or individuals that don't have any qualifications listed on the website. So you notice there are two authors here, Marcus Martinez and Allison Vane. And in a debate round, you would say Martinez and Vane in 2016. You notice also that Coding Behind Bars, Fighting Crime and Recidivism with Web Development is the article title, and that it comes from a website called KQED. And the date of publication was January 3rd, 2016, and that's the website. The next part of a card is the card text. The cards should be entire paragraphs from the source. This means that when you're making a card or reading a card, the card should never start and stop in the middle of a paragraph. It should always be the entirety of the paragraph, and you're just choosing to read certain parts from that paragraph. This is important for debates because it allows other debaters to make sure that this evidence isn't cut out of context, which really just means that the evidence doesn't conclude the opposite way that you're saying it does inside of a debate. It allows to make sure that people are using the evidence as kind of the author intended for most parts. For example, you can see that entire highlighted part in yellow is the card text. But, and this is important, that doesn't mean you would read the entirety of that text in a debate round, which is what we're going to talk about next. There are two parts of any card that are always going to be read. The first is the tag. You're going to read the entirety of the tag. The second is the citation. Now, in college debate, generally we stick to just saying the author and the date of publication. Some regions, if you're debating in front of parents or something like that, you might want to put qualifications in there, and some leagues have certain requirements for what you say. But for the most part, just know that author and date will generally be sufficient. The text of the card, so remember that big bunch of text that was there earlier, will often look different from card to card. If there is no underlining or highlighting inside of the card text, you will read every single word. This is wildly inefficient and is very, very frowned upon because it means you don't have a familiarity with the evidence and instead are just kind of winging it. You don't want to do that. The second kind of way that a card might look is if it's underlined but not highlighted. And in that instance, you will read only the underlined portion of the card text. And then anytime there's a highlighting inside of the text of the card, you will read only the highlighted portion of the card. So, for example, if you were going to read all of the cards, the same card that we're showing, I took out the underlining. to show you that this is what a card would look like if you had to read every single word inside of that paragraph. That would be time consuming. And given the time constraints that you've already learned about above in some of the other lessons, you know that time is a precious resource and you don't want to do that. So now I brought the underlining back into this piece of evidence, or this card, and in this format, the way it looks on the screen right now, you would read all of the underlined portion of this piece of evidence. Now, that's better, but there's still a lot of underlining, which is why oftentimes cards have highlighting. And here's the highlighted version. You can tell that by highlighting this piece of evidence, you are able to cut out a lot of the words and save a lot of time when presenting in a debate round. So hopefully in this video, you now know what a card is, why it's called a card, and have a better understanding of what should be read during a debate